Hi, and welcome to this second last industry talk for the Bachelor of Communication Media program. So today we're joined by Gianna Mazzeo. Is that right, Gianna?
Kind of. It's Gianna Mazzeo, but I don't expect you to say that. That's
Gianna
fine.
Mazzeo. Okay. So welcome, Gianna. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Um, And we're also joined by another special guest who might be familiar to some of you, Paul Richard, who's obviously a lecturer in the media program. So Paul will be joining us briefly at the start of this session for sort of special comments and questions and pitching in for further clarification on some of the things that we'll be going through, because today, maybe as opposed to some of the previous sessions, which were a little bit more about career development and strategy, which we'll certainly talk to Jana about throughout the talk. I thought it'd be cool to do a bit more of a specific deep dive, if you like, on some of your projects that you've worked on. And you sent through a few, and I thought I picked two that were kind of different enough, certainly in sort of where they came from and how they came to you, but maybe a little bit different also in terms of how you approached them and some of the decisions that you made and that sort of thing. But maybe before we get to that, I mean, you're a writer, director, DOP. You've sort of done all sorts of different things on film sets, I'm sure. So
hmm
I wonder, how did you transition from sort of uni life to working life, or is that a process that's still going on? Or yeah.
It's definitely ongoing. When I left university, I didn't have a very clear idea what avenue I wanted to pursue in. I definitely knew I wanted to work in film, but we had tried so many different things. Like I'd been a director, I'd shot some assignments, and I liked it all, and I didn't particularly have a favorite as yet. So I just started freelancing out of uni, still working in retail and just trying to get whatever job I could get my hands on, basically, to supplement that. And it was going well, and I was getting a bit of experience, but I felt like I needed to learn more in like the kind of hands-on space. So I interviewed for a job at like a video content agency, which didn't particularly interest me at the time, but I thought it would be useful to just learn from people who had been doing it for longer than me in the industry with bigger clients and bigger budgets. And so I worked there for a year full time as their kind of in-house content producer. I was shooting and sometimes directing and dealing with client briefs, writing treatments, doing meetings. And although the work wasn't like completely stimulating or in my like aesthetic or creative realm, I still learned a lot. And then once I felt like I'd kind of exhausted what I could learn there, then I finally quit and started freelancing full time. And that's when I've been able to kind of flex my creativity a little bit more. Um, yeah, and it's kind of turned out like where I am today is kind of writing and directing, and
Mhm.
also shooting, because I still like them both. And I think that um, it just depends on the job, whether I'll shoot or direct. Depends on the budget
Yeah,
and things
sure.
like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at now.
So, what were some, when I was sort of finishing up uni, I also worked at like a corporate production house,
hmm
sort of churning through projects, multiple
Yeah.
things on the go. Like, what are some of the what are some of the benefits of that, and maybe some of the challenges of that kind of role or that kind of experience?
Yeah. The challenges for me were trying to stay engaged with projects that I didn't particularly care about. And sometimes you'll get like if you work at a place like that, you might even have to work um, on projects with clients that maybe don't necessarily align with your values. Even I think they offered me like a horse racing like betting job, and I was like, oh, must I? But that's kind of part of what you signed up for.
Yeah.
But the good part about it was that I was really young. I didn't have much hands-on experience. And when I left, I all of a sudden had this really good folio that was kind of impressive for someone, for like a client to look at if they were going to hire me as a freelancer. I all of a sudden looked way more qualified than for that job. And I
Yeah,
had
cool.
bigger clients and more polished work to put on my folio, even if I necessarily didn't do it all. Like wouldn't necessarily written, directed, and shot it. But if I maybe just shot it, or I just directed it, and the job allowed me the budget to hire like a really good cinematographer, then it would look really great. And all of a sudden, my folio has like been elevated enormously, and that I think really helped in trying to freelance full time, because if people can't see that you've got proof of the kind of quality of work you can create, then they're way less likely to hire a freelancer instead of like a production company.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're a freelancing now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do you get work as a freelancer? Big
To
question, I
begin
know.
with, I know it took like probably I'd say a good 2 years to get to a place where I'm like earning an income that's comfortable. Um, so yeah, the first year or two was just a big hustle, to be honest. I was literally cold emailing people who I thought were making good stuff and seeing if they wanted to have a coffee with me, which was terrifying and awkward. And a lot of people were really kind and said yes, and like definitely gave me the time of day. So it wasn't scary once I was there. But I think it's such a standard way to go about like networking and getting your foot in the door, that the people you're emailing probably did it themselves like
Yeah.
5 years ago or 10 years ago. So they're really nice, and they tend to like um, give you the time of day if they have that. But I did a fair bit of that, and I just crewed on whatever I could get my hands on. Like, I emailed all of my friends and I said, if you need a production assistant, someone to get coffees on your set, I'll do it. So I did heaps and heaps of free work, and I think that was probably the most fruitful, because when you're a production assistant, you have the beautiful opportunity to sit back and not have any pressure or stress, and you can watch everyone work and figure out the dynamics and take a peek at different lighting setups that the gaffer and the DOP are doing, and how the director speaks to their actors, and all of these things that uni can't really teach you. You just have to watch and
Mhm.
see all of the different situations and all of the different dynamics firsthand, without the stress of you being in that position yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
yeah, so I definitely like I don't recommend like working for free all the time, but in the beginning of my career, when I didn't have many skills, I definitely was open and willing to doing it, and didn't feel like I was being exploited if I was
Yeah,
learning.
right. And
Yeah,
then, and so after you sort of, you did the hustle, you sort of you built up a few jobs and that sort of thing. So
yeah.
what about now? Is it kind of just making sure that everything's up to date in terms of a folio, and, are you still doing a lot of emailing and calling to sort of
No,
get work, or no, not at all? Okay.
not at all anymore, which is
That's
cool. Like I
amazing.
never would have thought that would be possible, but I think that, I mean, it's maybe not so relevant now, but I think that the industry was really thriving. There's heaps of work. Um, if like any business that exists needs content for their social media, so that's lucky for us. Um, I didn't have to write emails anymore as of maybe like a year ago. Um, and I think that there's probably two ways that I get my work most nowadays, and that's through Instagram. That'll be like, that's kind of the only way I get um, like totally new work from people I haven't worked with before, is if they have seen my Instagram and
Mhm.
um, would like DM me, which is really random. And then all of the other work is just through word of mouth. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, other production companies I've worked with who will recommend me, or clients that I've worked with before who will recommend me to like other similar businesses. So I think making a good impression with people you do work with and making sure you always maintain a good relationship is super useful tip, because that's definitely how I get probably like 70% of my work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, you know, obvious question in the current situation. It's kind of a token
Hmm.
question that we're asking everyone, sort of
Yeah.
what have you been up to? What's changed? You know, some of the benefits or drawbacks of the current situation for you.
Yeah. Um, I basically, at the end of March when this all happened, I had just luckily gotten back from a shoot in Darwin. So that was like a good 5 day invoice that I could rely on when that first happened. So I just returned back. Then we went into lockdown, and basically I think I had bookings up to 6 weeks in advance. Not fully booked or anything, but I had maybe like a couple of shoots a week for the next 6 weeks, and they all got immediately cancelled,
Yeah.
which was a little bit scary. Um, and I was thinking, yeah, what's our industry going to look like? Will it even exist? Is like a video a luxury that's not going to be something that brands can afford anymore?
Mm.
Um, but I then just kind of eased into it. I haven't worked much. I had one remote editing job that I was lucky to get, but that's literally all I've done in the way of like paid work between um, late March and now. Um, but because I have all this spare time, I thought what better way to spend it than like doing a music video or something creative like
Mm.
that, because now I'm on JobKeeper, which I'm really grateful for. And somehow in this strange turn of events, it's kind of like I'm getting paid for the music video, which is like has never happened to me before. I feel like I never allocated any of the music video budget to myself. So in some strange way, the ATO is paying me to make this music video that I'm making in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
So that's
cool.
nice.
Made it work for you then.
Yeah. But I think things are easing. They've started easing now. People are realizing that we're actually allowed to shoot if we can
Mhm.
manage to stay to have 4 square meters in between each crew member, and other safety precautions in place. And so people are starting to realize that it's allowed. And I've been starting to get a few emails again. So I think things will pick back up slowly if things continue on the road that they're going in terms of improving.
Yeah, cool. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's jump into these projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to start with the client liaison
Sure.
video.
Yeah.
So how did that project come about?
Yeah. I first sat down with, so that was a Mecca collaboration, the makeup, the
Yeah.
cosmetics brand. Um, and the first contact I had with Mecca was when they just emailed me saying, could you join for a meeting? We want to talk about like changing up our content a little bit. And that had gone through this producer that I worked with in the past, who recommended me because he didn't feel, I think he worked with a lot of men, and he was like, we maybe don't have the expertise in the area. So work with Gianna. So I went in there and we were talking about more of their basic content, like their how-to videos and their new product releases and stuff like that. More studio-based colored backdrop, like very basic. And I went in there and we had a chat, and it went okay. I didn't feel particularly confident after the meeting, and I left, and then I didn't hear back from them for a week. And then I followed it up, and they said they ended up going with somebody else. Oh, did I not present well? Like what? I wonder what went wrong there. And then I heard from them a few months later, and they mentioned that they didn't want to use me for their more basic content because they wanted to use me for something more creative. And then they had the briefs. That was cool because I think it's probably the first like commercial type with an actual budget that I've been asked to do, where they asked me for my stylistic approach, instead of me just working to whatever the brand's aesthetic guidelines are. So that was really cool. So that's how I got that
Hmm.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And so maybe I'll jump ahead. We've got sort of some questions to ask about both these projects. But so your client for this was, so in terms of like chain of command, was it the
Yeah,
producer that approached you, or was it Mecca specifically, or
it was Mecca.
both
They
kind of?
have, yeah, well, it was Mecca because they have an in-house team of producers, like content
Hmm.
team, with a
Hmm.
lot of businesses, a lot of brands are starting to have just because they're churning out so much content, costs too much money, I guess, to um, outsource producers. So yeah, I think most of them have editors and producers
Yeah,
in-house, and then
yeah.
they'll outsource directors and DOPs that are suitable for specific jobs, depending
Okay.
on the style.
So what was the brief that you received for the
The
job?
brief was um, we have got the opportunity to use client liaison for 6 hours. What can we do?
Okay, great.
And I was like, ah. um, and then I basically asked them if I could have a bit of time to come back with a treatment.
Mhm.
So um, when they gave me that brief, they did give me some links to other videos that they liked. And from there, I just came up with three separate ideas based on the few pieces of information they gave me that were the guidelines. And from there, they then picked one and we ran with that.
So would you always suggest giving options?
Yeah, I usually do, unless I feel really strongly or if the budget's really low and so I want my creative to be um, considered above. I don't want to say above the clients, but I don't know, if I'm doing a music video for free or something, I might not offer options.
Hmm.
But for a client with a proper budget, yeah, I definitely want to offer options so that they feel included in the process, and so that I make sure that I'm on the right track. Like at least surely one of the three different ideas I came up with are, on the same page with what they were thinking.
Yeah. Okay. So you went back to them with the options, and they chose the one that obviously became the video.
Yeah.
So in terms of the shoot itself, you had 6 hours,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Yeah.
Now that was 6 hours with the talent. Was
Yes.
there, I assume there was extra time around that?
No.
No, not at all. Okay.
It was crazy. It was silly. It was a mistake on my behalf. But um, it was 6 hours with the talent,
Yeah.
but because we were using an office space, they let us in, and then the six
Mhm.
hours began. So
Right.
I think we were setting up. We were bumping in up a big flight of stairs, which was heaps of fun. Um, we were bumping in for 2 hours, and they had makeup and wardrobe for 2 hours, and then from there on, it was like a scramble, like a crazy scramble.
Yeah, right.
Um,
So what was the crew? How many crew did you have?
We had, there was myself, I had an AD to help me with keeping time. There was a cinematographer and his camera assistant. There was a gaffer and a best person. Um, and I think that's it.
Hmm.
There was also like makeup artist and things, but they were all people that Mecca brought along.
Right, of
So I didn't
course.
have
Yeah.
to, yeah, deal with them. So basically, the way we did it was that so we obviously bumped in for the first shot and we set up the first shot. And then while we would shoot the first shot, Hannah, the gaffer, would be setting up for the next shot. And so we just pre-discussed all of the setups, and they would be, 75% of the way there by the time we were ready to shoot the next one,
Yeah.
which is not usually it would work at all, I think, on a content style piece. But that's kind of what we had to do. We had such limited time. I
Yeah.
think the reason why we ended up having such little, or I over conceptualized for the amount of time that we had, was that I think I was told we had a half day before I came up with the treatment.
Right.
But that's okay. We made it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of the setups and stuff, and this sort of leads into talking about maybe working with talent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there a way that you planned this shoot or a way that you normally plan shoots in terms of maybe making the talent feel a bit more comfortable? Do you sort of ease into things, or what sort of
Yeah.
advice would you have for working with talent? I mean, obviously, client liaison's pretty comfortable in their own skin and like they're
Yeah,
performers and that sort of thing, but
of course.
how did you approach working with them?
Well, that's an interesting question for me because it's probably, I reckon it's the area I lack in the most
Hmm.
um, is working with talent and actors and making them feel really comfortable because I'm like I've got like DOP goggles on sometimes. I'm like really concerned with the image and how it looks, and I forget that there's actually a person behind the camera. So I've decided I'm going to take acting lessons and things so I can
Hmm.
better kind of speak their language and understand their process because I feel like I'm not actually very good at that at the moment.
Hmm.
But with client liaison, it was really great because it was probably one of the first times I've worked with professional talent. Um, I think content is so prevalent at the moment and like influencers. And so you end up working with a lot of people who are non-professionals. They're just like people who take a mean selfie, but they get in front of the video camera and they're like quite scared and they need a lot of guidance. Um, so yeah, with client liaison, we're really lucky because all the camera and the lights and everything took so long that by the time we actually had to go for a take, we didn't have much time to perfect it. And they were
Right.
so amazing. They just got it first take every time and were really funny. So I
Yeah.
didn't have to do much, but I had met up with them prior to scout
Hmm.
the location, and they were there, and we had a chat, and then I spoke to them on the phone
Hmm.
as well. But yeah, when I was earlier on in my career, I definitely would forget to kind of, or didn't think that it was important to call talent and like make myself known to them and make them comfortable with my presence before the shoots. And sometimes it would be fine because they were just comfortable, but a lot of times it wasn't fine. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely recommend like um, it's not something I left uni um, having really like thought was super important, probably just because I care about aesthetics a little bit more. But that's definitely changing, and I think it's very important to consider and give like a lot of time to.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so in terms of you've done the shoot, it's all done, it's in the can. You say goodbye, you bump out. Um,
Yeah, I'll let
oh, really? Overtime.
yeah. Yeah.
So obviously, corporate gig post production starts straight away. Were you editing, or was that
I did edit this
okay?
one. We didn't
Yep.
have we didn't have lots of money for post, and I can
Okay.
edit. I kind of like to edit. So I decided to do it.
Hmm.
Um, and my thing is that I think Paul actually probably told me to do this back in the day, to always put on your quote that you're including 2 rounds of feedback, and any additional
Yep.
rounds of feedback in the edit is going to cost you more.
Yeah.
Um, but it was pretty smooth sailing with this one. There weren't many
Okay.
revisions. Client liaison were really funny, and they weren't super concerned with the piece being like heaps on brand because it was
Okay.
obviously just a silly like slapstick kind of very off-brand piece that was supposed to be more funny than anything else.
So in terms of footage, how much footage did you end up with? And obviously the finish thing is a couple of minutes long, less than.
Yeah,
It's a minute and a half, isn't it?
yeah. I don't know. There was probably about 30 minutes of footage or something.
Yeah.
Not a huge amount because again we had such little time. We only did like 2 or 3 takes of each section.
Yeah. Wow.
So it wasn't too bad.
So to wrap up the corporate gig, you get some notes, and
Hmm.
then kind of what happens to wrap it up.
We did a color grade,
Hmm.
which I've kind of always tried to outsource the color grade. I think a lot of clients
Yeah.
will be like, "What's that?" when you quote them. They're like, "What's the color grade? Do we need that?" Nobody's ever put that on an invoice before, put that on a quote before. And I think a lot of people will in that position, and like certainly heaps of my friends would just be like, oh, no worries, I'll just do it. And I don't think that's something one can do themselves
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, it's definitely an art.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
with like we had red footage as well. So if you're working with like really high-end cameras, the grade's going to be super important.
Yeah.
So we did a grade, and yeah, there's not really any formality as such that I end a project with. It'll be
So
like
it's just you sort
a
of
nice
you send
email,
the file.
send the file off, ask them if they have any last questions or if they need any last amendments, let them know that I had so much fun working with them. um, and, I hope that we do it again soon.
Yeah.
And then invoice.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
pray for a quick turnaround on the payment.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
a thing that you do at the end of a
No, no,
job?
no, no. I was just sort of like, for
Mm.
people who maybe were wondering about how you kind of wrap up a freelance gig, it's just sort
Yeah.
of those last steps of um yeah, I think communication's really important,
Hmm.
not letting that die kind of once your direct involvement with the project finishes. Like if you're directing something or if you're production managing, obviously if you're on the more production side of things,
Hmm.
you'll maintain communication longer after the shoot. But I just think keeping in
Yeah.
touch is
Yeah. Checking in
important
all the
until
time,
there's a
even if there's no
formal.
updates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
um
and sometimes I was thinking on this particular job actually, because the edit took quite a while, I kind of told myself that in future I would do a 50% invoice after
mhm.
production, and then the post-production invoice would come at the completion of the job. Just
Yep.
because in that particular job I didn't do that, and then I realized that crew had to wait quite a while before they got paid.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't know how long the client's going to take to give you feedback unless you give them like a
Exactly.
very specific time frame. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
even then
Okay,
it can
cool.
definitely exceed it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. All right. So Miss Pisces, obviously a very different project.
Yes.
And this was your own project, yes?
Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
was part of a series,
Okay.
though.
So
And I was
how did
one installment.
it come about that your participation in the series?
Yeah. So I when I was a bit younger, I think I was probably maybe in third year uni or something. I met up with a cinematographer. Her name's Amy Della, and we just had a coffee and told each other that we liked each other's work and just kind of kept each other in mind for any future projects. And nothing came of it very soon after, but eventually Amy did contact me, and she's a cinematographer, but I think she wanted to sort of produce a series that gave a bit of a platform to female or gender non-conforming directors, um, for just to showcase their work. And so she came up with this idea called Calendar Girls, which is a series where there's a different female identity director every month that directs a like a horoscope based short film or like montage. Didn't necessarily have to have dialogue or anything like that. And then they had to have a muse that was also female identifying, that was born within that star sign. So there was just that limitation there. And then the rest was up to the director to. And there's a really nice year-long series of 12 different videos called Calendar Girls. And so I did Pisces.
Yeah, amazing. So did you get to choose your star sign or you were given it?
We were given, but I'm a
Okay.
Pisces, so there you go.
Oh, cool.
Um,
So once you
yeah,
had, I mean, they're not huge restrictions. You can sort of
no,
take it any direction. So
yeah, totally.
how did you come up with the idea? Where did you go with it? Were there a lot of different ideas? Did you sort of
Yeah.
curate your ideas down to what it ended up being?
Um, it kind of it happened. So I wanted to use. So my muse was Feroza, um, who she wasn't a model or anything as such. She just really liked Amy and really liked the series. And so she emailed Amy herself and said, I'm a Pisces, like I really identify with my star sign. I'd love to be Miss Pisces. And I was stoked that she was so excited. So I was like, yeah, let's meet up.
Mm.
And we met up and she just explained to me why she identifies so much with her star sign, how she's like a strong, independent woman, and how her ethnicity, she's Indian Iranian.
Mm.
And she just chatted with me about some of the difficulties she'd experienced with expressing sexuality and being judged for it in a racial way by just people on the street, people she didn't know.
Mm.
And so she told me like about a few specific experiences in that realm. So I wrote the script based on that.
Mm.
So it's about her being judged by somebody who doesn't know her, who's just walked in off the street. And I knew I wanted to set it in a fish shop, just because I thought it would be like very visually stimulating, and obviously the fish ties into Pisces.
Yeah, sure.
Um, yeah, but I wrote a few drafts of the script and kept checking back in with Feroza because I was pretty aware that this was like a representation of her story, and I'm not
Mm.
Iranian or Indian, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing it justice and not making her feel uncomfortable in any ways because there's a few references in there um, to giving preference to like the normal, more palatable fish, let's
Yeah,
say, like the whiting and the salmon.
yeah,
And so I just wanted to make sure at every point that I'd checked in with her and that she was comfortable, and she felt it was a really good representation and she was happy with it. So
yeah.
yeah,
We've had that's come up a few times in terms of, you know, directors, writers, producers, even cinematographers to a certain extent are all storytellers.
hmm,
Um, so, there might come a moment in your career when you're given an opportunity to tell someone else's story,
yeah,
and for whatever reason, you might not initially feel comfortable doing that.
yeah,
So, in terms of an approach to doing that, if you feel really passionately about the story, obviously communicating with someone for whom
totally,
that story is very personal or whatever
yeah.
is obviously a really good way to go about it.
Yeah, and just
Um,
yeah, totally being communicative and considerate, and even like going beyond that singular person and checking in the wider like cultural community of whoever you might be um, telling a story about.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So in terms of, so I think the visual palette of this film is obviously very distinctive. Did you
Hmm.
have any guidance at all or any restrictions in terms of the visuals for the film?
No, none. I just wanted
Yeah.
to take it pretty far. I shared a studio at the time with friend Phoebe Schmidt, who's a photographer who did, I think she did the RMIT fine arts photography course, if that's what it's called.
Mhm.
Um, and she has amazing, she's a production designer as well as a photographer, and she has amazing style. So I got her on as art director, and I just watched a bunch of films and talked about different aesthetic styles that we really liked. And yeah, we just pushed it in that direction. It worked really well. She did an amazing job.
Yeah, it looks phenomenal. Um, and then, a similar sort of question in terms of working with talent. So you had obviously your lead actor playing Miss
Hmm.
Pisces, and then you had this other actor playing this sort of foil for the character. So had you before this time had you done a lot of directing drama or working in drama?
The only drama I had done was at uni.
Okay.
The short film that we did. So I'd worked with a couple of star now actors who are a little bit older,
Yep.
and we worked with that time. We did a casting, and
Hmm.
then I didn't do a rehearsal with them,
Right.
and I didn't do any work on the script with them before the day of the shoot.
Yeah.
And It was difficult and challenging, and I think it would have been a lot quicker and more successful had we met up prior and done rehearsals. I think at the time I was like not very confident in myself and wanted to avoid hanging out with strangers, so I
Yeah.
just avoided doing the rehearsal. Also, I was pretty conscious that we weren't paying them, so asking them to come and meet me for another day felt weird. But
Okay.
I would recommend in future definitely always having a casting, making your decisions based on like a face to face, or even like a, maybe it's more accessible now to even do a Zoom casting.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, making a decision upon having met somebody, and then after that, doing a rehearsal or two, depending on the project, has always been a lot more successful for me. So when I did Miss Pisces, we had a rehearsal,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit difficult because Feroza's not an actor, she's not a model, and so she needed quite a bit of guidance. But
Hmm.
doing the rehearsal was really beneficial, and then there were just certain techniques that worked in our favor. Like I feel like she was quite tense because she was nervous on the day,
Yeah.
but it worked really well because the whole scene is quite unnerving, and
Yeah.
it was okay that she seemed uncomfortable, and also the kind of staring down the barrel of the lens,
Yeah.
um, instead of like looking off camera to who she was talking to, which is the more kind of traditional thing to do. It
Hmm.
all kind of built up and added to this like really unsettling, uncomfortable exchange of dialogue that I was really into. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so how do you, I mean, all the films that I've done are primarily very script driven, very dialogue heavy. So I guess how do you rehearse what is obviously much more of a performance
Mm.
driven, not particularly dialogue heavy? Yeah, how do you go about rehearsing something like that?
We just did lines in my studio.
Okay.
Um, that's what we did. I know what you mean. Like it's hard without the space and being able to block um, a lot of the, like the second half when she's inside um, the display cabinet.
Mm.
But I was confident in I've forgotten his name, the actor, but I was confident in his performance after the meeting that we had,
Yeah.
and knew that he would nail it, um, and hoped that Feroza would bounce off him well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
um, how to better prepare for that. Like, I wonder what the pros do for their feature films. I guess
Yeah.
they,
I just wondered if there was like a lot of conversation, like kind of workshopping or
yeah, there was,
talk
I sent
talk.
them references. Like, I remember one of the
Yeah.
references I sent was The Sopranos, and it was Chris in his like dream sequence
Hmm.
in the, I think it's in the sandwich shop, and that was like exactly how I wanted it to feel, like dreamy, like vacant. And I sent that to them, and I think that helped a lot. Like if you can show references, sometimes that speaks a lot louder than the words that you can
Yeah.
potentially mislead people with.
Yeah.
Um, so that was helpful for me. And also just having them, because she was a younger girl and not a professional, and it was a middle-aged man who she'd never met, who I'd never met. I thought it would be good for us to all just meet in a low stress situation so we all felt
Yeah.
more comfortable with one another, especially given the content. It was a bit strange.
Yeah.
But he was really nice, and um, if that hadn't have gone well, maybe we would have recast the man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the shoot itself, how long was the shoot?
It was a full day. It was 10 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And was it sort of shot in order?
Yes, it was in
Wow.
order.
Okay. Yep.
Um, yeah, we shot it in order. We did the stuff with Feroza alone, scaling the fish first in that corner, and
Yep.
then we could reset for the wide. And we shot. We had to because Feroza's makeup and hair and everything changed. So to flip
Yeah.
between that would have. We definitely wanted to prioritize performance and like the linearity of the performance. So feeling like it was, I feel like that's a lot better for actors, even if it means that you have to reset lighting. Um, yeah. So we did the little scene in the corner where she's scaling the fish, and then we reset for the wide, and then we
Hmm.
had the male actor walking in, and then we shot all of that conversation in a wide up
Hmm.
until when she changes outfits. Then we did mids of her, mids of him. Sorry, we did mids and close-ups of her, mids and close-ups of him, and then we sent her to get her hair and makeup changed, and we reset the lights again for a wide. And
So
then we did it again.
so for coverage, you always do, like, obviously establishing shot for the whole thing. Do you do generally full dialogue in mid, full dialogue in close up, or is that something that you think about beforehand?
I like to do all of it. I have done before. I thought I was saving time by saying, okay, we only need this little bit in a close up. I can only imagine that needing that. But
Hmm.
it tends to, I think that like performance is better when you let them run from start to finish, first of
Hmm.
all. And then also you have that in the edit if you need it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good foolproof way to do it, at least in my point of my career. But I've listened to podcasts. I listened to this really good podcast called IndieWire Filmmakers Toolkit, um, where I've forgotten the host's name, but he speaks to like famous directors about new releases that they've just worked on.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of directors say that they don't fluff around with coverage. They like
Right.
know exactly what shot they want and they shoot that shot. And like I think that would be a nice way to work, like when I'm much better and more confident in myself. But for now, it's nice to have coverage, I think.
I was going to say maybe that comes just with years and years and years of experience, and
Experience, yeah.
just, you know,
And backing yourself.
yeah,
And
there's
also
shooting
not
to edit,
having
and then
shot,
there's
sorry.
no, go.
Well, also not, maybe something that plays into it is not shooting so much coverage so that then a producer or some kind of stakeholder can like change or like feed into the edit. Like this is all we've shot, and this is like kind of the cut, and this is how the only way it can be.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit different on feature film as well, where it's just
Mm,
sort of like time is literally money.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, so you wrap the project, everything's done, and then you've got footage. So post-production on this one, how long did it take you to work through, say, a first cut?
Mm.
Did you edit it?
No, I got my friend Greta Robinstone to edit it,
Okay.
who's great. She also did the course with
Yep.
me. She we didn't have very much time for this, so we edited it in a week. We finished it in a week,
Start to finish?
which is silly, start to finish. So
Wow,
like
that's
2 days
crazy.
after the shoot, I think I dropped the drive off to her the night of the shoot.
Yeah.
She came on set because it was going to be so fast. She
Yeah.
came to the shoot and watched, so
Yeah.
it'd be a lot easier. So she took the drive after the shoot, and then 2 days later she had a rough cut for me.
Yeah.
Um, and there wasn't much leeway in terms of how it could be put together. Like it was shot listed a certain way, and she, unless we just worked really well together, and she just knew what I was thinking, and she, when I saw the rough cut, I was like, yeah, this is pretty much there.
Yeah.
Um, it was just unfortunate having so little time, because I think one of the downfalls of the short is the sound design and the audio,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But that was also something that I didn't have many contacts in that area, so that was something I consciously started to build up
Mhm.
after that project. So I was like, I don't want bad sound ever again. It's really important.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. Where
yeah,
I'm teaching
but
me
my
teaching
friend,
me. Sorry, go.
my friend who also did the course composed the bassy trap song as well, which I really liked.
Yeah,
But
cool.
I noticed that when you watch it on an iPhone or something, you can't really hear the bass. So that's another thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm just going to say before we move on, if anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask Gianna, please drop them in the chat box and we'll get to them shortly. Um, so yeah, very quick turnaround time. What,
Mhm.
looking back, apart from audio, was there anything in terms of like, were there big challenges or things that you would change or?
Um, Trying to think. I don't think so.
Hmm.
I really had a fun time on that shoot. The crew was really great. Everyone was really good friends, which is always
Hmm.
super helpful if you can try to get crew that know each other. Um, it was just a fun shoot. It was really like I remember being like super excited when I was watching the split, and yeah, I was really excited to put it together. But that's not always the case for sure. We were a little bit over
Yeah,
time. The DOP was like getting a little bit annoyed by the end because he had to leave.
right.
Um, but shoots go overtime.
They
I
do.
say never plan for something like an hour after a shoot because
No.
that's going to be your bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess something that's come up a little bit through the conversation has been collaboration.
yeah.
So collaborating with the DOP or collaborating with an editor or with talent or whoever it is. Do
Hmm.
you have any sort of rules of thumb or suggestions or what are your kind of guidelines for a good collaborative process on
Yeah,
set or before a shoot or whatever it is?
yeah. Um, I think something I've learnt is to work with people that you trust who can do their job better than you, and that you can give creative license to them and trust them. I'm a bit of a control freak, and so that was like a hard thing for me to learn. I would try to do everything
Mhm.
myself, and I'd wonder why it wasn't that good. And so once I started like relinquishing a bit of control to people who are much better than me, like outsourcing, a composition for music instead of just sitting on like premium beat for 12 hours and not finding anything good, um, was really useful for me. And also, if you find people that you like working with and that you think you've worked well with them and enjoyed their company and all of that, I think that that's like so rare, and so should be really valued and like keep using them over and over. Like this is the kind of thing where you see like actors and directors always participating in the same films together, because once you find like someone you get along with really well, um, it's kind of pretty special, I think.
Yeah, I think that also talks to what you're saying before about meeting with actors before a shoot,
Yeah,
because
you want to be the
always
friend.
always cast the person, don't cast the role, which flies in the face of
Yeah,
everything that you're told. But at this, there's no point if an actor's going to be a pain to work with, and I have had a
yeah.
couple of very painful experiences
Same, yeah.
where it's just like it's not worth it. You want to have someone that's fun, that listens to you, that
Yeah,
is offering their own um,
exactly.
opinions and just sort of genuinely collaborating.
Yeah, and
Um,
sometimes they might bring something to the role that you didn't expect. And like, yeah, I think we should be afraid to let people change our vision a little bit if it's going to be for the better.
and shoots are stressful enough without having, dicks on set. Like just
Yeah,
yeah.
completely. Yeah,
Okay,
we've
we've
all
got
been there.
a few questions that have dropped in. Was the fish shop an actual fish shop?
Yes, it was a fish shop. I went
Okay.
driving around. This always happens to me. I just decide that I'm gonna drive around to every fish shop in Melbourne and walk in. And I found a really good one in Coburg, and they let us use it for free. They let us like take with our hands like fish out of the display cabinet and put it in buckets.
I was going to ask about
And
that because that was a
I
moment
was like, "Are
where
you sure?"
my production manager hat was on. I'm like, how did you get fish and all that sort of stuff? So that was
He
just
let
from
us
there.
use their fish. I don't know what he did afterwards with it. Anyway, it's not my problem. He let us use their fish, and then he said, "Whatever you don't need in the display cabinet, just put it in this bucket." So it was just
Okay,
like,
great. Free for
I was
all.
like, I'll just leave that with you. Yeah.
So, and then there was the follow-up question there is like, what's your process in terms of finding the right location? Is it literally you just look at every single option that you
Yeah,
can?
I try not to. I feel like everyone's go-to thing is Google it. And I think when you Google it, you get like the boring stuff that everyone's already seen. So I try to just like think about what I'm looking for. So for example, for the fish shop, I knew I wanted something quite spacious, and so I just
Mhm.
went to like outer suburbs and started going. Like I just visited fish shops. Now I'm working on a music video where I need like a grungy, wide open space, whether it be like power lines or under a bridge or something. So I've just picked a suburb that I know that I don't need a permit for. That
Mhm.
to me seems pretty on like on brand in terms of the aesthetic, and so I chose Campbellfield, and I just went driving in Campbellfield, and I found a bunch of places.
Yeah,
But I think
cool.
doing it in person is a lot better. You take your own photos, and you end up recycling stuff that people have used already.
Yeah, I think that sort of leads on to Nee's question there, which is about do you do field work before filming, since there might be differences from idea to practice. So after you've
Yeah,
decided on a location, do you then go back and visit it again, or do you sort of take a
yeah,
bunch of photos? Yeah.
I do, because there's lots of things that feed in. Like you might take your initial quick snaps of like a bunch of different locations, and then you look at like the producer and the DOP, and they feed in, and then you come up with certain like there might be like certain obstacles to work around in terms of like light or permits and all of the things. So then, yeah, it's happened with this music video that I'm working on now, that I've already scouted a bunch of locations, and then the DOP
Hmm.
and I have decided that we're gonna shoot the locations from really far away on a super long lens to kind of like compress the image a bit. So now I have to go back and make sure that we can get far away enough from all of the spots that I've picked. So yeah, I feel like I'm constantly going back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, do you have any advice for funding projects? Constantly battling the struggle of asking friends in the industry to crew, but then also wanting to work with professionals and pay them their usual rate. When did you transition from uni crew to professionals, and how did you fund this?
I think that the first time I transitioned was for Miss Pisces. I was looking for a cinematographer, and I was thinking about shooting it myself. And I just thought, I'm going to go out on a whim and message this guy that I met one time when I was a production assistant. And he was like 35 or 40. And I was like, I sent him the funniest email. I should probably find it again, but it was probably said something like, "Hi, I'm like really shy about asking you, and like, please don't take offense, but I have no money and I'm making a short. Like, here's the script, here's the treatment. Please say no. Like, don't feel don't feel obliged. Do this by any means. Like, absolutely not backing myself whatsoever." And and he replied within like 5 minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, sounds great." I
Yeah,
think a lot of people in our industry, especially like maybe when they're a little bit older, they have bills to pay or families to support, and so they need to take a lot of corporate work. And so when the
hmm,
opportunity comes up to make something fun,
hmm,
a lot of the time there are the mentality that like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'll work for free. They generally have their own gear a lot of the
and
time, and yeah,
I've had the experience where, someone's done that for me, like an amazing DP's come onto a project, and then, it's
yes,
kind of done with that unspoken thing that when another job comes along and you need someone, like a paid gig, you'll reach out
yes,
to them. It's
definitely,
it's kind of how it works. Yeah.
absolutely. And if you feel like you've used someone too much, like if you've asked them for free work, a few too many times, there's a million other people you can ask as well.
Yeah.
Obviously not to take advantage, but if nobody's making a profit and it's a fun piece for their reel, they can decide whether it's worth their while or not, and you don't have to feel
Yeah.
bad about that, because you'll probably do a lot of free work for other people as well.
Yeah, for
In
sure.
funding, I am just starting to look into proper funding bodies. I
Hmm.
haven't actually ever applied for a grant, but I think it's now time that I probably can't make another short on completely favors again.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at like Film Victoria and Screen Australia, and just did a workshop in grants and funding. But
Hmm.
I'm, yeah, by no means an expert and haven't applied yet, so I can't really offer much help with
Yeah,
that.
there's I think Acme and a few other places are currently doing like free
Yeah,
online
workshops.
seminars on how to do
Yeah,
stuff like that. So,
yeah,
it's
because there's
probably
heaps
worth.
going at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And obviously, once all this gestures at everything, once all this blows over, they'll want to sink money into projects. They'll want to
yeah,
kickstart things again. So it's probably
exactly.
one good thing to come out of all of this.
Yeah, totally.
Um, so you see, get a lot of work through Instagram. Do you think it's necessary to have an account specifically to showcase your work in a professional manner, or just share work on your personal account?
It depends on the kind of person you are, I think. I think my personality like has a lot to do with the type of work I want to make, these kind of like very dreamy femme production designs. And I don't think that that's very separate from my personal life. So I combine them. And I think just the nature of social media, it tends to be more successful when you can pour some of your personality into it. But having said that, if you want to give off a different brand, and maybe you're more interested in like advertising and content, so you want it to be like really professional and glossy, I'd probably advise to make a separate one. But yeah, I think it's person specific, and I really like keeping them together, because I think just a video page, maybe in my opinion, I don't tend to follow people who just have like a totally professional account. I think it's a little boring. But
Yeah, I think so in my experience, sometimes DPs might have
they do, don't they? Yeah.
just for
Yeah.
video. They might not want to show their dog photos on their
Yeah.
professional account or whatever. But then there are other people that do have all that stuff kind of in together. So
Yeah. I think both
yeah,
are fine. I tend to be like a bit more engaged when I can see yeah,
and
someone's person.
it can be hard juggling multiple accounts from the other side of it as
Definitely.
well. Yeah,
And regular posts is stressful.
yeah. Um, all right. Well, we've made it through all the questions, and we're sort
Cool.
of bang on time. So all
Perfect.
that's left for me to do is just thank you, Gianna, so much. It's been a
No
delight
worries. Thanks for
talking to
having me.
you. And we'll catch you soon.
Great. Well, thank you.
All
Good
right.
luck with the rest of the semester.
Thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.